Today we are celebrating not only the last Sunday of ordinary time during these extraordinary weeks and months, the last Sunday in ordinary time of the liturgical year, but it is the celebration of Christ the King. In Matthew's Gospel, the real image of Jesus is teacher. He gathers his first followers on the mountain and gives them a chapter 5, 6, and 7 of his Matthew's Gospel, teaching them. And in the liturgical year, we have been, in a way, students, listening to Jesus, learning. And today is the Gospel, which is the final exam, if you will. Have you learned enough to live my ways? Not easy ways. And we will begin the liturgical year again next Sunday with the first Sunday of Advent, saying, yes, I have more to learn. But today, the final exam is Jesus as a king who has been teaching by example, not just words. We have a very dramatic exam, final exam, where he talks about visiting, really. Have you been involved? Have you lived in your actions, not just thinking about faith? So he puts it to us. I would like to put it in terms of these days of the pandemic. We are waiting for the vaccine. In my experience, those past months, there are people who are hungry, thirsty, strangers, naked, sick, and in prison. And I'd like to go through those people and how we are in relationship with them. This is the exam then. And maybe it's an exam about the future. Strange. I have found that people are very lonely, isolated, even in families. Not able to visit grandchildren or grandparents or children or parents or the sick. There's much separation. And so if we could look at this sermon that Jesus gives as, could I do something with those who are hungry for friendship, hungry for meaningful conversation, not just physically stomach hungry, but heart hungry. As often as you call them, write them, greet them, you are greeting me. Last week we talked about Christ investing himself in us, putting us on. And now he is saying, continue to do that because you are doing it to the least, the hungriest. You are doing it to me, for me and to me. So what can we do with the hungry? We can call them. There is a sacrament I'd like to share with you. I know we have the 7 sacraments in the Catholic Church, but I have come up with an 8th sacrament. It's called the sacrament of listening. And it is, in the Catholic Church we have, all sacraments have to have gestures. The pouring of water, the anointing. And it has to be accompanied by words. I baptize you. I bless you. I absolve you. Well, what is the gesture for the sacrament of listening? Listening to the hungry who need to talk, who need to know that they are being heard. The gesture is this. The closing of our mouths. Saying, by my closed mouth, I will not be talking, I will be listening. And the sacramental words, the 3 words, are tell me more. Sacred words, inviting people to speak so that they can hear too what they're saying, not just you, but that they can hear you listening and they can hear themselves. So all these invitations to visit some way the hungry, the thirsty, those who are thirsty for meaningful conversation, thirsty for someone to slake their thirst by care. We can't visit lots of people, but not physically, but we can. We have Zoom and Facebook and emails and phone calls. We have ways, but it takes time. It takes a lot of time, and that's the sacrifice. To be with those who are thirsting for meaningful relationships, the lonely to themselves. They haven't heard themselves speaking. So I close my mouth in the sacramental gesture and I say the words, tell me more. When they speak, they say something and say, oh, tell me more. I don't say, oh yeah, I know, that happened to me too. No, that's taking the sacramentalness away from that, the holiness away, the blessing, the grace. Tell me more. What was that like? How did you feel? You are there for them and they will feel like they're thirsting for Christ's presence in you, Christ who is invested in you. 38 times in the Hebrew Scriptures, stranger is mentioned. Be welcoming to the stranger. There are people whom you might know who themselves lately have been strangers to themselves. They don't know what they're thinking. They haven't had anybody with whom to reflect. They watch the television, they listen to the news, they read the newspaper, but they haven't spoken. They are strangers to themselves. And you can meet them and help them not feel stranger to relationships, to society. And then there are the naked who have not been dignified by conversation, meaningful conversation. They've been, to clothe is to dignify, and to clothe them with care, understanding, compassion. That's what Jesus is saying. Can you do that? Is that in the exam? How are you doing with that? A double plus? C minus? Have you clothed anyone with the dignity of caring, of understanding, of forgiving? It's a big one. Giving dignity to the stranger, to the hungry, to the thirsty, by being present to them in this limited way. Tremendous loneliness. We all feel like strangers in some way. We all feel unclothed by friendship. Even within families, we get distance from each other. And then there are the sick, those who have not experienced the medicine of meaningful conversation. Maybe there are those who are sick by alienation from themselves, and we are there helping them to be healed, not just from the virus, but the virus of alienation, maybe alienated from themselves. And then the imprisoned, visiting the imprisoned, not just in jails, but within the bars of regret. Maybe there are some whom you have imprisoned by your grudges or your unforgivingness. You can visit them in the prison of their regret themselves, their sadness, and maybe you can release them from the prison, maybe that they formed themselves, or the prison of this virus, or the prison of your own harsh judgment toward them. So Jesus says, have you learned enough yet to go out of yourselves? It's a long journey to come out of ourselves. It's a long journey to be so self-interested that you give yourself rather than grab yourself, rather than celebrate yourself all the time. But to be a sacrament of listening, to listen with your ears, to speak with your ears. I'm here. I want to hear, and maybe I will speak, but only after I help you hear you. As often as you do this to the least, to the needy, to the sick, to the stranger, you do it through me and to me. So it's a great celebration of Christ who did that, who listened, who clothed, who fed, who nourished. And we follow him. A poem. Here is thy footstool, and there rest thy feet among the poorest and the lowliest and the lost. When I try to bow down to thee, my obeisance can never reach to the depth where thy footsteps rest among the poorest and the lowliest and the lost. My pride cannot bow down in obeisance to where you clothe yourself in the clothing of the humble among the poorest and the lowliest and the lost. My heart can never find its way to where thou keepest company with the companionless among the poorest and the lowliest and the lost. It's where Jesus as King walked among the strangers, the sick, the hungry, the thirsty, where he has walked among us and invites us to be a sacrament of his presence, his real presence, to the reality of those who need him in you.